So without further ado, let me introduce to you our speaker. Welcome to the DAR Museum Online. I didn't introduce myself either. I am Sarah Kirspel, the Coordinator of Engagement and Outreach at the DAR Museum. And I want to introduce to you Vanessa Hines, Executive Director of the Stagville Memorial Project, as part of our monthly Tuesday Talk lecture series. Presented on the second Tuesday of the month, this series highlights topics related to the DAR Museum's collections, from decorative arts to the American social history to best practices in object preservation. For a full list of our upcoming lectures and programs, you can visit our website, which is www.dar.org/museum, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at DAR Museum. We offer family programs, Girl Scout programs, symposia, exhibition tours, evening events, and more. Coming up soon is our first Family Day of the year on January 13th. We're also hosting a Lunar New Year Festival on February 17th, so we hope you can join us. Our next virtual program will be the February 13th Tuesday Talk on Redware, presented by DAR's own Carrie Blau. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Vanessa Hines. Vanessa Hines is the founding director of the Stagville Memorial Project, a public art and history program organization that works towards establishing art that uplifts lesser-known local histories. She holds a BA in journalism from Biola University and an MS in organizational leadership from National University. And she currently lives in North Carolina with her 3 kids and her husband. So take it away, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so thank you for having me this morning at the DAR Tuesday Talk. I have yet to visit the Daughters of the American Revolution Museum in DC, but I intend to stop there on my next visit to DC to see what it's all about. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing about the storm. Yeah, we got a high winds alert earlier today, and our school district canceled classes. So in addition to the potential internet and power going out, my 3 children are also at home. So if they happen to burst into my office in the middle of this talk, I hope that will be okay. I'll try my best to continue, but I just wanted to let you know that that is a potential disruption. I'll start by sharing that I met Kevin Lucas, the curator of education for the DAR Museum, last April at the National Council for Public Historians annual conference that was held in Atlanta, at a workshop where I was presenting information about this work that I am engaged in. And after that presentation, he invited me to share with the DAR community. So I'm so grateful to be here again with all of you, and I hope that you'll find my presentation engaging and interesting. Now, I'll say that this talk is broken into 2 parts. Part 1 is a setting of the stage, so to speak, where I will offer a brief history of the city of Durham as I understand it. And the part 2, I'll share about how the Stagville Memorial Project came about, what it has to do with Durham's history, and what our goals are for the future. So let's get started. Okay. The city of Durham was first incorporated in 1869. This is 5 years after the Civil War surrender at Bennett Place. That's what this is an image of. Bennett Place is also coincidentally in the city of Durham. Land was donated about 20 years prior by a local doctor named Bartlett Durham to a railroad company for the creation of a new railroad station. And this railroad station was named Durham's Station. Dr. Durham died later of pneumonia not long after that, and when the city was incorporated, it was named in his honor. Now, much ado has been made about Durham's beginnings. It is said to have been a great site of interracial cohesion and cooperation as in the aftermath of emancipation. Both newly freed Black folks and working class white folks worked together on the construction of railroads in the tobacco and textile mills at the time. But what about prior to that racial cooperation? to answer that question, I need to begin the story about the Bennehan and the Cameron families and the land that they acquired and the people that they enslaved to profit in their businesses, most notably at one of their holdings called Stagville Plantation. Between the late 1700s and up until emancipation, the Bennehan and Cameron families enslaved an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 people in total on their cumulative lands. Around 900 people were enslaved at Stagville Plantation at emancipation, and afterwards, many of those folks on Cameron's Stagville land stayed and lived in the relative ideological security of sharecropping. Still others left to settle on lands and newly formed townships nearby. This is a slide of Horton Grove, the slave quarters at Stagville. Some of those folks who left Stagville Plantation include Charles Amy, Monroe Jordan, David Justice, Jasper Jones, Cornelius Jordan, all of those men who were previously enslaved by Cameron, and they went on to purchase land in what would become the Hayti neighborhood of Durham. I'm going to add a side note here, and just to share that the Stagville Memorial Project is working with archivists currently at the Wilson Library at UNC Chapel Hill, where the Cameron family papers are currently housed. And they're also working in other archives like the one at Duke University, North Carolina Central University, and the State of North Carolina archives to help us learn more information about the founding of other historically Black neighborhoods in Durham and the involvement of formerly enslaved folks in those communities. We hope to have more detailed information on what these early settlers did that contributed to the vibrancy of these communities. This information gathered will be presented in an interactive digital history exhibit that's being funded by Villanova University. And it's in partnership with us and the Durham County Library. That is slated to go live the week of Juneteenth later this year. I'll come back to why unearthing and sharing those local histories is important to the larger vision of the Stagville Memorial Project near the end of this talk. Now, the folks that I mentioned earlier went on to create tremendous communities of Black culture in Durham, and in neighborhoods that became Hayti and Bragtown, Hickstown, Crest Street, the Bottoms, and so on. There were churches and schools and many businesses that were established. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention another group of folks who were not Stagville descendants, but indeed had a huge impact on the economic development of these neighborhoods and districts, including what later became known as Black Wall Street. Some of these men include John Merrick, Aaron Moore, C.C. Spalding, James E. Shepard. They were involved in the community that established the largest Black-owned insurance company, North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance, and one of the largest first Black-owned banks, Mechanics and Farmers. James E. Shepard started the institution that became North Carolina Central University, one of the first historically Black colleges in the state. There became so much wealth in Black Durham neighborhoods, especially in Hayti, that both W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, they're both prominent and influential Black thinkers of the time, albeit at odds with each other ideologically. They both have positive things to say about Durham. Here's what W.E.B. Du Bois had to say. There is a singular group in Durham where a Black man may get up in the morning from a mattress made by Black men, in a house which a Black man built, out of lumber which Black men cut and planed. He may put on a suit which he bought at a colored haberdashery, and socks knit at a colored mill. He may cook victuals from a colored grocery on a stove which Black men fashioned. He may earn his living working for colored men, be sick in a colored hospital, and buried from a colored church. And the Negro Insurance Society will pay his widow enough to keep his children in a colored school. This is surely progress. Even Martin Luther King Jr. came and gave a rousing speech at White Rock Baptist Church, one of the churches founded by Stagville descendants, where he famously said, Let us not fear going to jail if the officials threaten to arrest us for standing up for our rights. Maybe it will take this willingness to stay in jail to arouse the dozing consciousness of our nation. Suffice it to say that amidst the racial terror of the Jim Crow South, many Black neighborhoods in Durham were thriving places. However, in the year 1970, as part of the urban renewal movement across the nation, Highway 147 was created in an effort to bridge Durham with the newly created Research Triangle Park. And this move destroyed many Black businesses and did tremendous damage to the community and culture of Black Durham. There's a local public history group called Bull City 150 that was active in, I think, 2015 through 2018. And they did an incredible investigation, in-depth investigation into this. And they published a digital history exhibit about it. And I want to show this image to make that point clear about the decimation that happened in Hayti as a result of the construction of Highway 147. So you'll see on your left here in this slide, that's a picture, an aerial view of Hayti in 1950. And on the right is an aerial view of Hayti in 1972, after Highway 147 was created. Now, this is kind of a side note, but if you have time, I would highly encourage you to check out this Bull City 150 website. It's so incredible, the amount of information they were able to pull out of archives and the narrative that they were able to share with what happened to Hayti. So unfortunately, Hayti never really recovered as far as to the level of thriving that Black businesses had prior to the construction of 147. Now, another side note I'll mention is that the Hayti Heritage Center has recently won a large grant from the federal government to revive Hayti. And so I'm really, just on a personal note, really looking forward to what happens with Hayti in the next 10 to 15 years. Okay, so I'm going to stop the history portion. We're going to skip from about 1970 to the early 2000s, where the city of Durham demographics began to shift. So between 1970 and the early 2000s, many people moved out of Durham. It was not necessarily a place of progress anymore like it once was. There were high crime rates, a lot of empty buildings. But in around 2010, Durham demographics began to change as a result of tax initiatives that Durham policymakers offered to businesses to house their businesses in Durham. And because of that, many businesses came, and Durham's population, or Durham started to experience a population boom. Okay, so that's the end of part one, a brief history of the city of Durham, and I'm going to head into part two, and this is more about the story of the Stagville Memorial Project. So I moved to Durham from my hometown of Los Angeles in 2013 with my husband and our 6-month-old daughter at the time. The summer after we moved to Durham, many Black folks and allies across the nation took to the streets to protest the death of Mike Brown after he was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. Protests continued after Eric Garner was killed in New York. Protests continued when George Zimmerman got acquitted for the killing of Trayvon Martin. So during this time was the first Black Lives Matter uprising. Now, locally in Durham, somebody spray painted the words Black Lives Matter on a Confederate statue in downtown Durham. And I heard about this on our local public radio station as I was driving one morning, and I changed course to wherever I was going and started driving towards the statue so I could see it with my own eyes, because up until that point, I had never seen a Confederate statue before. Being from Los Angeles and never having traveled anywhere in the South before I moved to Durham, it was still rather new to me. So when I saw the statue in person, I knew that there were more Confederate statues in cities around, and I began to wonder what other statues, memorials, monuments, or public art that brought attention to people who were enslaved exist. I had to ask myself, where's the rest of the story being told in our public spaces? What I didn't know at the time, but can clearly see now, is that these questions were coming to me and to other people in what I now know as the beginning of a community-wide and national reckoning with Confederate statues that some are still standing in communities today. So I had these questions in my mind that really didn't leave me alone. And so a few days later, I began a website for myself just to catalog all the places where memorials to the institution of slavery and enslaved people were. I did one locally for Durham, I did one for North Carolina, and I got real ambitious and did one for the world. And what I found was that there are a few of these memorials on the African continent in a couple countries. There's one in Jamaica. There are a couple in places in the Caribbean. I found a few that honored our antebellum heroes like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, a couple in New York. I found one on UNC Chapel Hill's campus. Now, if you're familiar with the geography of North Carolina, you'll know that Durham and Chapel Hill sit side by side. Duke University and UNC Chapel Hill are about 8 miles apart from each other, much to the chagrin of college basketball fans. But I found that on UNC's campus, so about 8 miles from here, there was a small piece of art called the Unsung Founders Memorial, and it was given to the university as a gift from the class of 2002. And this piece of art honored the people who were enslaved that built UNC and who were enslaved at the university in service of students and faculty up until emancipation. It was at that time that I also learned about Stagville. And I learned that Stagville was the largest plantation in the state, and that in its heyday spanned over about 30,000 acres, which is about 46 square miles. But curiously, I didn't find any memorials or any monuments or any kind of public acknowledgement about Stagville in Durham. I will just say another side note here is that the site where Stagville Plantation once was, there's now a historic site there that is run by the state, that is run phenomenally. The historians there are incredible, well-versed, very knowledgeable and compassionate people that offer tours on Stagville site from an enslaved person's perspective. They do a wonderful job, but historic Stagville sits about 9 miles north of downtown Durham. And with all these new people coming into Durham, myself included, there's a big chance that if you're not a history buff or curious about the stories of the city that you're living in, you might miss out on the rich history that is to be found at Stagville. So I got to thinking, what can I do to help bring the story of Stagville to downtown so that more people might come into contact with this history? So I started telling my church community about this idea to build a memorial of some sort, and eventually got connected with a faith-based community organization that coincidentally was already working to help a historically Black neighborhood tell its own history through art. And it turns out that this neighborhood was actually one of the first founded by formerly enslaved people from Stagville and other nearby plantations. And that neighborhood is called Bragtown. Excuse me. I went to a Bragtown Community Association community meeting. And from there, I met people who could actually trace their lineage to Stagville. I pitched my idea to them, and I asked if they would be willing to join me in an effort to establish some sort of public art that was uplifting, or that uplifted the humanity of those formerly enslaved at Stagville. I was very grateful when they said yes to me. So from the time that I had seen that Confederate statue on our main street in downtown to the time that I attended this neighborhood association meeting, protesters had pulled down the Confederate statue in Durham as part of this nationwide reckoning with Confederate statues. Now, in 2021, myself and the Stagville descendants who had committed to joining me in this effort, we approached the Durham County Board of Commissioners for funding for a piece of art, and we asked if we would be able to place the piece of art where the Confederate statue once stood. Now, they agreed to fund us on the condition that A, we become a 501c3 organization, and B, that we find a different location. At that time, the General Assembly had passed a law that noted that if any monument or Confederate memorial had been pulled down because of public safety concerns, that whenever it was deemed safe again, that those memorials and monuments need to be replaced. So I also think that our local government was wholly uninterested in being a hotbed of controversy, which I understand. And so they were not interested in us placing a memorial in the place where the Confederate statue once stood. But to their credit, they offered us a few alternative locations that in the future will be redeveloped to become gathering spaces. But for right now, they're not really places where people congregate. And in our estimation, they seem to be locations that were sort of out of sight, out of mind for us. So we began looking for other places and eventually decided that this art needed to be in a central place in Durham. There's a place in downtown Durham called CCB Plaza that is kind of on the route of many of our parades. It's where lots of events happen. It's where protests happen. It is really our town square. And so it makes sense to my board and I that that is the place where we place this piece of art. But the tricky thing is that that space is owned by the city of Durham and not the county. So I'll leave that there. I'll get back to that in just a second. After we presented to the Durham Board of County Commissioners, we met with some students at Duke Law School, and they helped us write our bylaws and get our affairs in order to apply for nonprofit status. We received nonprofit status in the summer of 2022. And all the while we were holding community listening sessions with Stagville descendants to get their input on the type of art that they'd like to see, the themes, and even the colors and the materials that they would like us to use when we got to that point. During this time, we were also writing grant applications to try to secure more funding, and we were adding board members to our 501c3. We found that even after we did all the things that our local government had asked us to do, we still were running into challenges, primarily because of that county-funded city land problem. So because this is a county project, the city, even though the city does work well with the county sometimes, because there's not a process for an organization to approach the local government to kind of for support like this, there's a lot of red tape, and it really kind of seems like we're kind of getting stuck. But as it stands, there's a memorandum of understanding between the Stagville Memorial Project and Durham County that's been approved. And so we should start receiving funding installments soon. And soon after that, we'll be able to find an artist and work with descendants and other stakeholders to create our initial designs. Now, I noted earlier that the importance of unearthing and sharing descendant founder stories, that it is important to us, and here's the reason. It's because land is comparatively cheaper in these historically Black neighborhoods. Home values don't rise at the same rate as they do in historically white neighborhoods. And because of that, there are many deep-pocketed developers who think it's a good investment to buy up tracts of land in these neighborhoods for developmental purposes. Now, what's at stake here is erasure. If we don't take the steps to protect these historically Black neighborhoods from predatory development, we could be witnessing more loss of community and culture, just like we did with Hayti. Now, I want to be clear and say that not all development is predatory, and that there is a way to develop more responsibly. And this includes providing significant affordable housing options within the new development. It includes seriously taking into account, to the point of modifying plans, the concerns of current residents. among other things. So I'll just say this one last thing, and I'm actually closing way earlier than I imagined. But our end goal with our art, the eventual art that we establish, um, is to preserve these historically Black neighborhoods and uplift these lesser known stories about these folks who helped create Durham's community and culture, so that these people can be protected and that their neighborhoods can be preserved. And that concludes my talk today. I'd love to hear any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. That was very interesting. Do you have any descendant stories that you could share or would like to share? Or oh, you just muted yourself. There you go.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I don't have any descendant stories prepped for today. Although that is something that we want to continue to have on our website. So I hope to be able to offer some descendant stories for everybody in the near future. But as of today, I don't have any kind of offhand.
No, that's okay. I will open it up to our audience as well. If you have a question for Vanessa, you can go ahead and drop it in the Q&A. But we don't have any just yet, but I have a few questions. So what, Vanessa, what is kind of the next steps for your project? Where do you head from here? You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. I muted myself because I didn't want y'all to hear me taking a sip of water. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you asked that question because in some sense it feels like there's been a lot of prep work, but we really almost like have yet to begin the actual project part. This process has really felt like a lot of kind of like hurry up and wait, like we're prepping and doing a lot of this work and then we're kind of waiting on the funding or we're waiting on other things. So I'm really excited that our next phase is going to be putting out an RFP or an RFQ. And if you don't know what that stands for, as I didn't know what that stands for, it stands for Request for Proposals or Request for Qualifications. We're not sure which one we're going to do, but when we do decide, one of those is going to be posted on public artists' websites and other places so that public artists can see it. But essentially, we're asking for artists to show us what they can do and to apply to us, kind of draft and show us like a draft proposal about what they can do. And then we're going to have descendants and other community members vote on the artist, and then we're going to choose one. And then once we have solidified an artist, then we can really begin the design process of what this thing's going to look like. So once we have that, and then once we have the location solidified, we can really begin to get started. That's when like the really exciting stuff starts.
Have you decided if it's going to, like, what it's going to be? Is it a statue? Is it a mural? Is it I don't know what your other options are, a piece of stone, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. So the tricky thing about murals is that murals can be painted over quite quickly. There are a lot of murals in Durham that do a great deal of storytelling about our city's history. But in the location that we are thinking, there's not a wall that we want to use. It's like an open space, an open gathering space. So we are imagining a large piece of contemporary sculptural art. Yeah, something that people can interact with in a way. Something that people can interact with digitally in a way to kind of expand the story. Yeah.
Will it have a storytelling element to it, or interpretive panels as well?
Yeah, so a lot of that really is location specific. So in the location that we are requesting from the city, there is space for extra panels. There is space for some seating around whatever art, we put up. But there's also in the works kind of a database where Stagville descendants can upload stories and can upload pictures and photos of documents and Bibles and family trees and things like that. That's also in the works. So there will be some sort of like QR code for some way for people who are visiting the actual piece of art to connect digitally with the story as well.
And some questions from the audience. What
Sure.
sort of review process will you have in place when you're selecting the art?
That's a really great question. And to be completely honest, we're still figuring that out, because so much of what we can do is location specific. Um, it's we're not entirely sure what we're all going to put in that RFP or the RFQ, but as far as review goes, the people that will be looking at these applications will be people on the Stagville Memorial Project Board. It might include people from county staff. It might include city staff, depending on the stipulations that the county or the city gives us. We have hired a public artist named David Wilson, not to be the artist to create art for us, but as sort of an advisor to help us walk us through this process. David Wilson is a prolific public artist who's done several things around Durham, several things around North Carolina. He's really a wonderful resource for us. So we're really heavily leaning on David to help us create these RFP, RFQs, and to help us to create the selection committee and the selection process, and things like that.
Do you have a mechanism for the public to have any buy-in on the selection process?
So it's super sensitive. So we want to make sure that the people who have the most say are Stagville descendants. We also want to make sure that the people that have a say are people who live and work in Durham. So those are the only two groups that we have really thought about opening suggestions to. But if we receive an email from somebody, I don't know if people have something they want to share, we'll look at it. But as far as the people that we think are the main stakeholders, it's primarily Stagville descendants and then people who live in Durham currently.
Very good. Did you want to open your call to any North Carolina Lineans? Is it North Carolinians?
Yeah. So, do you mean open our artist call?
No, you wanted to connect with those from North Carolina.
Sure. Yeah. I would love to connect with anybody who wants to connect with us and who, wants to know more about what we're doing or even has suggestions or additional questions. I'd love to be in conversation. Yeah. So my email, if y'all can still see it, I think I'm still sharing my screen, is on
Yep.
there on the bottom right. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
All right, sounds great. That's all the questions that we have. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for taking the time. And we really appreciate you joining and sharing with us. So thank you again,
Wonderful.
Vanessa.
Thank you,
Take care.
everyone, for your time. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.